Now available in paperback and e-readers. E-Steam, Little Girl Lost. The devilish diva helps a lost little girl find her way home in this devilishly funny E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam, Little Girl Lost in paperback and e-readers today. When I was watching the Wonder Woman movie at the Magic Johnson yesterday, I noticed something quite peculiar about the portrayal of Wonder Woman in this 2017 adaptation. Now, in this 2017 adaptation, Wonder Woman seems to act a lot more traditionalist than the original concept that was presented in William Moulton Marston's comic books in the 1940s. Now, in the 1940s, when William Moulton Marston originally created Wonder Woman, he originally created her to be a feminist heroine. He created her to be a strong, powerful woman who was the equal of any man. However, the Diana that was presented on the film was pretty much acting very much like a very traditional woman in being extremely submissive to Steve Trevor and deferring quite a few times to his leadership. She pretty much wasn't really the equal of a man in this film. She pretty much needed the support and the help of a man in this film, and she needed to follow the leadership of a man in this film. So she pretty much was more traditionalist than the original concept that was in the comic books. Now, in the comic books, they make it like she's a very strong and powerful woman who could do things without a man. But we see in the film that she pretty much needed to follow the leadership of a man, she needed to follow the guidance of a man, and she needed to defer to the knowledge of a man to survive in a man's world, as the Amazons called it. And we see that she couldn't really do much without men. She pretty much had a very childlike perspective of things. This is something that Sandman and Turd Flinging Monkey have talked about regarding women, and we saw that pretty much presented in the way that Diana behaved. She was very childlike, and she pretty much saw things from a childlike perspective, and she never really grew past a certain point because she was very emotional. We also saw a lot of emotionalism from Diana. Now, they say in the comics that the Amazons have really control over their emotions and they think like men. However, in this film, the women were very emotional, and Diana herself was very emotional in this film. So she was more feminine in this film than what the traditional feminists want to see from a Wonder Woman. For them, Wonder Woman is like a man in that she has strength like a man and she has power like a man. And yeah, that was on screen, but when I saw in the film, primarily was a female who was pretty much submitting to the leadership of a man, taking guidance from a man, taking instruction from a man, and pretty much the man was in his traditional role, and Diana, as she came into man's world, was slowly adapting to the submissive role and traditional role of a female. So she was pretty much becoming more and more traditionalist as she pretty much interacted with the men in that community. Even when she got together with the soldiers that were a part of that Steve Trevor recruited, she still deferred to them and their leadership. She pretty much knew her place in society. That's what we were seeing in this film. That's why I say that this Wonder Woman was a lot more traditionalist than the original feminist concept. And it pretty much is very interesting to see that because, one, this film was set in World War One, and while there was one scene where she was in the room with the men that was pretty off-putting, and saying that she was pretty bold, for the most of the film, she was pretty much submitting to their leadership and doing things that they needed to do, with the exception of the battle at the No Man's Land, where she pretty much showed, again, some very childlike behavior because she was seeing things from a really naive perspective. I mean, she was getting distracted very easily. She was very emotional about things, and she wasn't really focused like the men were. And what they were showing in that scene was how men were very logical and very tactical, and how females were very emotional, and they do things based on emotion. Because Diana's reasons for jumping out and battling in No Man's Land were based on an emotional view of things. It wasn't really this so-called logic points like they have in the Wonder Woman comic, where they say that the Amazons act and think just like men. She was very emotional in jumping out to go attack those guys and attack those snipers. And she pretty much, again, followed the leadership of those guys when it was time to take out the sniper. She was following behind Steve Trevor and doing what, and following his lead. She was not going and trying to do things for herself. So I didn't see a strong and independent Wonder Woman in that film. Yes, she had power, superpowers, but when it came down to time to be a part of a relationship and work with men, she pretty much followed their lead. And that is very different than what feminists and William Moulton Marston had the character planned. They wanted the character to be this strong and powerful woman who did things by herself and pretty much was so powerful she could get men out of things. But when we look at her on the battlefield, she was pretty much a traditional female in many aspects. Yes, she had superpowers and had incredible abilities, but when it came down to following the lead of a man, she pretty much did that like a traditional woman, and she pretty much acknowledged Steve Trevor's wishes even up to the final scenes in the film. So when we look at the film, Steve Trevor was not presented in the traditional emasculated way he was in old school Wonder Woman comics. In this film, he was pretty much put back into a very traditional role as a man, and his manhood was pretty much acknowledged in this film. This is what makes this adaptation very unique, because Wonder Woman comics were very feminist, and some of them had some undertones of BDSM and stuff like that, but they were very feminist as opposed to what was presented in the film. In the film is very traditionalist, and it presents things that I noticed that many MGTOWs talk about regarding females and how they behave and how they operate. And Diana pretty much, yes, she was very childlike and she was very naive about things. And her ideas about war were very much childlike. She had a very idealistic picture of war, and that pretty much contrasted the horrors of the wars that was going on screen. And what she had a big idea in her mind of confronting this Ares and killing him, but she wasn't thinking about the human cost to the people around her. And that was a lesson that I don't think really resonated with the character as related to the story, due to the screenplay and the way it was written. I really think that that lesson really did not resonate deeply in that story, because she still saw things really was from, again, a childlike perspective. And this is something that MGTOWs often talk about regarding females and how they see the world, that they often see things very childlike and they behave in a childlike way. And I saw that presented in this Wonder Woman film. This is why some people say that women often are like children, and I saw that, firsthand in this Wonder Woman film, because this Wonder Woman as presented on screen was extremely traditionalist. She pretty much, again, was submitting to Steve Trevor's leadership, following his directions, and she pretty much could not do anything without Steve Trevor there to pretty much guide her. And that was very different than your Wonder Woman comics. And in some ways, it pretty much acknowledged that women could not do anything without the guidance and the leadership of men. And that's a real powerful statement about how important men are in society. And it was very interesting to see that in a Wonder Woman film, because here we have this character, again, who was presented originally to be a feminist ideal for white women, and it pretty much was presented as her submitting to the leadership and the guidance of men. And this pretty much flies in the face of the whole strong, independent black woman concept. Many black women have learned that they can do things without a man, and to see Wonder Woman not able to do things without a man to help her, lead her, and guide her should be something that black women who watch this film really think about, because it pretty much shows you that God was right in saying that a woman needs a man, because Wonder Woman pretty much was Steve Trevor's helpmeet in this film and his support towards completing his mission. And that's what the traditional roles are all about. And that's what we saw in that Wonder Woman film that was presented in 2017, and it pretty much refutes many of the ideas that William Moulton Marston had regarding Wonder Woman when he created her in the 1940s. If you like what you see on this channel, you can help me make more videos and try to pay for the covers for the SJS Direct 2017 catalog by donating to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my ISIS series titles, you may do so by clicking the link to the Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.